Hello there. This is Lynn Reilly, author, licensed professional counselor, master energy therapist, and your host of Living Serendipitously. Today, I'm going to be talking about how living in the flow of life means allowing yourself to feel all of your feelings, even the super uncomfortable ones, and why they are important to be felt. When I talk about living serendipitously, that means recognizing the unexpected joy in all of your experiences, not just the ones you want or are trying to create. It's also not meant to be forced. It's a practice of seeing how what happens in our lives has purpose and power and value. All of it. Because those distressing feelings that you do feel, that everyone feels, they get a bad rep. There's a lot of great strategies to support moving through them, but sometimes the best and most effective is just to feel them. Let them be what they are and experience them in the moments that come. Feeling them does not mean that you have to live there, and it does not mean you have to even spend lengthy amounts of time with them. It just gives them permission to be heard. There's a lot of talk about thinking positively, and I'm always teaching strategies on how to reconnect with your joy for that. But it's the light and the dark. We need both of it to exist, and we need both of them to live. And so this is just honoring what we have and using them for their actual purpose. Because what tends to happen is we don't like the uncomfortable feelings, the anger, the jealousy, the disappointment, the overwhelm, the lingering sadness, so we work to avoid it. Most people have a go-to response to push it down, to numb it, to distract it, or dismiss it. And what happens when we do that? They pop up again when you least expect it, and often in inconvenient and inopportune moments. They build on each other, waiting for the opportunity to be felt, and they go at it hard. Or you bottle them up for so long, they impact your health. All those funky aches and pains you talk about that you also try to mask with quick fixes and temporary solutions, yet they seem to be chronic. Yep, those are from repressed emotions. And long term, they are not going anywhere until they are heard and felt. So today we are going to be focusing on the importance and benefits of feeling your feelings and practicing non-avoidance. You can learn more of these self-awareness practices and concepts in my working book, 30 Days to Me, which can be found on my website, livingwithserendipity.com, along with my children's book, The Secret to Beating the Dragon, as well as through sacredstoriesmedia.com. So let's get started with the basics on this one. When you choose to shove your emotions down and ignore your feelings, they become layered in your system. Just like the laundry and the mail that gets piled up when you don't do anything about it, your emotional body gets cluttered with the unexpressed energy that wants to be felt. It's waiting to be experienced, to be cleared out. We tend to repress the hard-hitting emotions that pack a punch, so they are most likely the ones to be withheld, and then they end up building on each other. This goes for anger and resentment, because really they just feel icky and they feel disempowering, and we don't like the way that it feels, so we push it down or we quickly try to resolve it. And then the next time something upsets us, we think of the last 5 times we were angered and felt dismissed. Same goes for shame and guilt. They build up over time and they resurface when something triggers them. And they feel awful and heavy and burdensome. And how about sadness? Grief. Let's talk about avoidance on this one. I've worked with grieving children and adults for the entirety of my career. And I've had way more personal experience with grieving than I'd prefer. But it's taught me a lot about the importance of feeling what you feel. For me personally, the longest grieving processes that came in my experiences were when I attempted to shove my emotions down and not feel them or distract myself from them. They lingered and simmered and waited for the right time when I would let them come to surface. But most of the time, I didn't. I was not comfortable with them. So anytime I would start to get an inkling that they were trying to come up, I would double up in my attempt to keep them pushed way down and hope they would just dissolve. I use all kinds of distractions, including dramatic relationships and getting involved with other people's problems and using alcohol to numb the discomfort, using different drugs to numb the discomfort. I would be always involved in some sort of chaotic situation. And this was so I didn't have to feel or have slow time or have quiet time to feel what was going on with me. And so did they dissolve? Of course not. That never happens. Instead, they became layered underneath. So when one event would happen, I would feel the pain of several other events underneath it. New grief brings up old, unresolved grief. Let me repeat that. New grief brings up old, unresolved grief. So when something happens and you feel a loss that's current, you will feel all of the pains of the unresolved grief before it. And sometimes in these bizarre ways. Like you could hear about the loss of a friend's cat, and suddenly you are feeling the sadness you have around losing your grandmother 5 years ago, and are in a puddle of unclarity of what is actually happening. Sometimes it really doesn't take that much. When we push them down, they really are layered emotions. And what I have discovered from both personal experience as well as professional experience observing others, the best thing that we can do to resolve these uncomfortable feelings is to feel them, experience them as they come. I was amazed at the difference of my process the last time I grieved the loss of someone when I let myself actually feel my sadness and my anger and my disappointment for months after the loss. I chose to practice what I preached, and oh my gosh, the difference was astounding. My ability to bounce from moments of deep heartache even surprised me. I let myself feel and flow in the river of my emotions, and it was the healthiest and most balanced grieving process I've ever had. Now, did I enjoy it? No, I did not appreciate it at that moment, but there were many times when the relief would come that I did. Because as those moments, emotions surfaced, and I let myself feel them instead of ignoring them, they moved through me instead of hiding in different compartments of my being, waiting to be found and heard. And no, I'm not suggesting that you have the luxury to just feel your emotions all the time. I know that you have responsibilities in areas of life that don't allow you to be expressing every emotion as it comes. But you can notice the signs and create space in your life to let them come up, be heard, and be released, which then gives you the actual relief you're craving. My last grieving experience came when I was in private practice as a counselor, and I specifically remember saying to my clients telling them what I was going through, so I wanted them to be aware in case there was a day that I was off or whatever. This is part of the human experience, and I was going through it too, and it's very, very real. And so I was able to, even just saying it out loud at those moments, release it and listen intently and be present for them at that time. And then when I was by myself, I gave myself permission to feel what I had been holding on to. Because that was my job. It was my job to take care of myself. And it's your job. In fact, it's your only your job to take care of yourself. And that means respecting how you feel and nurturing yourself when you are going through something and are letting the uncomfortable emotions come out to play. And the more you practice self-care and commit to doing things that bring you joy, as I've talked about in previous podcasts and in 30 Days to Me, the easier this will be. When you are feeling your feelings, give yourself space to also reward yourself with doing something that feels good or nourishing. It helps mend the wounds even quicker and allows you to shift your energy in a way that feels more balanced and calming. I also recognize that you are not always going to choose your feelings in the moment because you feel you're not in a good position to do so or you're not comfortable with it. They will get built up and you will feel the symptoms of this. And if that happens, you are setting yourself up for a meltdown or a big burst of them at once. This is also okay. It really is. I mean, we're not going to be perfect. I'm not. This still happens to me. If you are doing your best to not avoid, but they build up anyway, that's okay. Allow that to happen too. I'm a pro at listening to my feelings. I really am. But I'm still practicing giving myself the space to fully feel them in my busy life. Because when the breakdowns happens, I never like it in the moment, but I'm always grateful for the gifts it brings me after the fact. When you look back at the times you've fallen apart, when you let yourself fully feel the emotional buildup, what happened next? Did you gain more clarity, or did a solution come into your life? Or did you push those same emotions down and wait for them to come out in a different way? Typically, our meltdowns are the doorway for us to release all that we've been holding in, to make room for what is to come and for the clarity to find its way. I actually just had this experience last week. I had been feeling extra cranky and irritable, and those are typically my symptoms of when I'm overdoing it or I'm overgiving and I'm not paying attention to my needs. So I decided consciously to spend the morning unwinding before starting work. I went out for a run, I took a bath, and I thought, okay, this should be enough. I've given myself space. But it wasn't. I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. And I heard the voice in my head say, leave the house, go breathe. You don't have space for this. And at that moment, I couldn't ignore it. I had this need to escape the walls around me. So I jumped in my car and I started to head to a park that was about 45 minutes away. And this part of me was like, oh my gosh, you don't have time for this. You have so many things to do. But this other part of me is like, it's happening. It's happening now. So I'm driving. I hadn't been to this place in a couple of years, but I felt the pull to go there. And I was about 15 minutes past my house and felt completely unsettled. And then my eyes started to well up. I did not see this coming. All the feelings I had been holding in started to come out. I felt confused and overwhelmed and scared and lost. And I felt like I had no direction to which way I was going. And I felt like I was crumbling. And I'm driving and I'm crying and I'm trying to focus on the road. And I had no idea where any of this is coming from. And then suddenly I was physically lost. I didn't know where I was, what town I was in, or even how to get out. My inner world met my outer world, and I was totally lost all over the place. So I pulled over, and I just cried. And I mean cried. I was hyperventilating. I was shaking. I was truly melting. And at that moment, my fears took over, and I felt completely alone. So I pulled out my phone and I texted one of my closest friends and I told him that I was unraveling and I needed him to remind me that I always find my way. And he immediately replied, "You always do. And your greatest victories always seem to come right after you feel like you are completely unraveling." And with that little reminder, I started to breathe again. I knew it was true. And I remembered that the meltdown makes room for the clarity. We just have to allow it. But let's be honest here. When you feel those feelings, when you're in the middle of that level of pain and confusion, you are not typically saying, "This is the best. I'm so glad I'm experiencing this." Not so much. No, you're looking for the quickest way out to avoid the discomfort. And what I am reminding you is the quickest way out is to let yourself feel in the moment whatever it is that wants to come up. Believe me, I'm not in love with the process, but I do know for sure the process is necessary. Trust the process. So I spent an hour sitting by this stunning waterfall that afternoon, waiting for some clarity. I gave myself space to feel. I reached out to a few friends to talk. I took care of me. The only clarity that came was that I knew I was going to be okay. And at that moment, I really wanted a martini. But that wasn't happening, and it wasn't the quick fix I needed. But that's what I needed at that moment, was that space to just feel and allow and to be uncomfortable and know it was going to be okay. I was tired, and I needed a change, and I couldn't see what that change was. But experience has shown me that the information comes to me right when I need it, not always when I want it. And that's not my favorite lesson either, but I respect it, and I respect its accuracy. And sure enough, once I let go thinking about it, the solution started to come to me, because clarity continues to find its way. Feeling your emotions is not the practice of choice for most, but I'm encouraging you to practice embracing it and discovering for yourself the amount of relief, prosperity, clarity, and serendipity that comes with it. And let me give you one more reason to consider this practice of feeling your feelings. Because when you don't, it directly impacts your body. Stored emotions have a direct response to your physical body, and all of your aches and pains and illnesses are directly correlated with your emotional and mental patterning. This could be an entirely different, separate podcast in itself, but I can tell you this, with my experience as a master energy therapist and feeling where people hide their emotions, their body takes a hit over time. Your disconnect from yourself creates headaches and dizziness. When you feel threat or unsupported, it sits right in your neck and at the top of your spine. That tension in your shoulders is from the expectations that you put on yourself and other people. The pain in your side, anger and resentment. The ache in your lower back, fear. Your stomach issues, all stress and powerlessness. They are asking to be addressed, which is why they are waking up your body with pain so you notice. Only you can decide if you will listen and respond. What an awesome and effective way to give yourself some physical relief on top of the emotional and mental relief you're in need of. You've done the shoving it down thing and avoiding it for a while. Why not try something new? For more of these life-enhancing concepts and practices, check out my working book, 30 Days to Me, on my website, livingwithserendipity.com, secretstoriesmedia.com, and booksellers worldwide. Thanks so much for joining me today as you practice the benefits of feeling your feelings, being with you, and living serendipitously. And I will catch you next time on Living Serendipitously with Lynn Reilly.